When it comes to electronics, sound waves are represented by continuously varying electrical voltage. Electronic circuits are designed to work in a range of voltages. If you try to send an inappropriately high voltage into the electronic circuit, the circuit will have to stop it at its voltage limits. The part that is too loud will be abruptly cut off, and this is known as clipping. Different circuits clip differently. Tape clips in a very soft, gradual way as the magnetic material gets saturated. Tubes can exceed their voltage limit for a short time, then fall back. This sound characteristic makes them desirable for guitar amps. Solid-state electronics clip in a less pleasant way, generating harsher overtones. And digital clipping is even more offensive because it generates aliased overtones that are unrelated to the input signal. With early fixed-point workstations, clipping internally was a problem. There were multiple points where the signal could be digitally clipped, so you had to be very careful with your levels. Digital clipping in the box is the worst kind of clipping you can create, so it probably contributed to some of the early feelings that digital mixing was inferior to analog. Mixbus and most other modern DAWs use floating point numbers. Floating point numbers can convey values much larger and smaller than our hearing range, from the sound of a candle to jet engines and beyond. In a floating point engine, normal mixing processes won't cause clipping, but it can be caused by certain types of processing, as we'll explore later. Very short clipping, whether it's tube, solid state, or digital, is usually innocuous. A loud short spike such as a snare drum probably won't suffer much from being clipped. So in some cases, the digital meters might show clipping, but it's not worth worrying about. So what does this mean? We need to use our ears in determining what is detrimental when clipped. Let's follow through a typical signal path and investigate the sound of clipping at different stages. We'll start at the source using a microphone as an example. Mics have a maximum SPL, or the level they can pick up without clipping. With dynamic mics, this isn't much of an issue. Condenser mics are more likely to be overloaded because they contain onboard electronics. If the source that the mic is picking up is above the mic's SPL, the mic will clip the signal. Once the source is clipped, it can't be fixed in the rest of the signal path, so it's important to stay within the limits of your microphone's maximum SPL. Next comes our first analog input. This can be a mic pre, a line input, an instrument input, or even a DI. Most of these inputs have some sort of level control. If we push the level too hard, we can clip the signal in the analog domain. For most sources, keeping this input at an optimal level yields the best result. In some cases, we can use this form of clipping to achieve a desirable sound. Some preamps and DIs include two gain controls, so that we can clip the input and adjust the level of our output to prevent clipping the next component. An A to D converter typically comes next. It takes our analog signal and converts it into digital information. If our level is too loud going in, the analog section of the converter will clip. In most cases, clipping a converter will cause an unpleasant, distorted sound. A short peak might be able to get by without noticeable artifacts, but an extended overload might yield an unusable recording. Some A to D converters handle clipping much better than others. Certain models have a built-in soft clip or limiting effect that prevents the analog signal from squaring off. Certain models are known to handle level better for more specific applications, such as making a track louder in the mastering process. But for practical recording and mixing applications, it's essential that we keep our levels at a range that makes sense. A short clip on the converters here and there may do no harm, but why bother recording at dangerously high levels when we can add gain in the box later with no artifacts? Let me give you an example. I'm going to demonstrate clipping by recording a few guitar passes in Mixbus. Now, when I'm recording guitar, I have my instrument pickups going into my instrument input of my interface to the A to D converter of my interface. Now, the converters of my interface are built right in, so I don't have any level control between the instrument input and the converters of my interface. They're just one-to-one. Now, I can throw a pedal in the mix there, and that would be another stage of gain control that I would have to adjust. So I would be going from the pickups of my guitar to that pedal, which I would have to adjust the output level of to go into the instrument input of my interface. I would need to make sure I was practicing proper gain staging at each stage. So the first thing that I do when I'm recording guitar is I want to get some proper levels on the input. So I have some adjustments here. And you can see the adjustments that I'm making on screen. With the interface that I have, it will show me on screen the levels that I'm making. With the channel strip here in Mixbus, I can see exactly how much level is coming in off of the converters. So I can see that I peaked at about -13. That's pretty good recording level for me. I like to peak at around -15. This will do for this demonstration. So let me record the first guitar pass. There's a little something for us to work with. What I'm going to do is record this second guitar pass, and I'm going to show you some gain options that we have in Mixbus. With this next guitar pass, I'm going to try to fill the bit bucket. I'm going to try to get as much level as I possibly can. I'm going to clip the converters a little bit. I want you to hear the sound, what we can do about that with gain, because there really isn't a whole lot we can do. Let me go ahead and record that now. Okay. So now I've got my couple of tracks. Let's go ahead and listen to them. So let's look at this first clip that I recorded. I have a couple of different options when it comes to adding gain in the box. I can use region gain or clip gain by using Shift plus 6 or 7. I can raise it until it looks like it's super clipped in the box. The thing about it is that unlike the clip underneath it, it's not going to have any of those noticeable artifacts because we're using a 32-bit floating point engine. So let me get it to the point where it looks like it's clipping. I'm going to turn it down a little bit so it's not killing our eardrums here. And let's take a listen to it. So notice that it has a lot more volume to it, but it's not necessarily clipping in the box. It doesn't have any of those clip overtones. So let's hear it as if it were to be clipped in the box. We have a little plugin that I can add in here. Let's pull it down here so we can see. So this is a clipper plugin here, and I can add a little bit of digital clipping to it so we can hear what this sounds like. That sounds terrible. But yeah, I was just wanting to show you that in the box, that's what clipping would sound like in the box. And that's what it sounded like when we had 24-bit and 16-bit digital audio workstations. Almost everybody's on 32-bit floating point now, so clipping in the box isn't much of an issue as it used to be. Next, I want to look at this track that we actually intentionally clipped going in. This is where the converters are clipped, so this is just a take that was recorded too hot in the box. So let's listen back to a little bit of it real quick. Oh, that's terrible. So yeah, what we can do is we can reach for the region gain to turn it down. And now it looks like it's not clipping. We can see that the waveforms are still squared off. It doesn't appear to be clipping in the box anymore, but when we play it back, it still has that noticeable clipping sound. Another common misconception, let me put this back to where it was. Another common misconception is that we can just turn the fader down and then that'll take care of the problem. Fact of the matter is, we clipped this coming in. It's still going to sound clipped, even in the session. Notice it's got those clipping artifacts on it from the A to D converter. There's nothing that we can do to save this clip. It's pretty much unusable at this point. And as I said earlier, if we have a sharp clip here or there, it may not be too noticeable, but this guitar was just recorded too hot. It was overloading the source. The final stage that is often clipped is your sound card's output. Mixbus signals can fill the full 32-bit range, but your sound card is limited to 24 bits at best. We need to keep our master bus level below full-scale digital signal on your sound card. If you're trying to get the perceived volume loud enough to compete with popular music tracks, you're inevitably going to get peaks above full-scale digital. Mixbus provides a master limiter to keep our signal within the voltage ranges supported by our sound card. Most digital audio workstations don't provide this limiter on the output by default. The master limiter in Mixbus keeps peaks to -1 dB full scale, rather than allowing them to reach digital zero. Note that this doesn't necessarily mean that your mixes will be 1 dB quieter than others. The perceived level has to do with average volume, not instantaneous digital values, but we'll save that discussion for a later video on metering. There's one final stage of potential clipping to take into account: intersample clipping. Here's where things get really tweaky. An analog signal is not made up of discrete points, but is a continuously variable line. So it is possible to cause clipping that is never shown on a digital meter. Check out this example. All of the digital points are within the voltage limits, but when the signal is reconstructed, it exceeds the clip level. The performance of devices, such as DACs, and algorithms such as MP3 players and encoders, vary dramatically around this critical range just below and above full-scale signal. Unfortunately, we have little control over what happens after we finish our mix. We want our songs to always sound good, so we should avoid values in this range.